What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be doing the review of the Under Armour Tribase Rain 5s. So it seems like every year I'm saying the same thing about Under Armour's Tribase Rain series of shoes, and that's that this is the year that it's finally going to break into the mainstream of serious training shoes. And they've had some pretty good attempts in the past. I've liked just about every single one of them. I have been a fan of Under Armour's Rain series of shoes ever since the very first one, but I know that there were some things keeping them back from actually, fitting the majority of people out there, namely that they were just pretty narrow. I think that all kind of changed by the Rain 3, and by last year's Rain 4, it all kind of changed because those were a really solid pair of training shoes, definitely under-marketed. And while they're still kind of sleepers, they actually made my runner-up for my top 5 training shoes of 2022. But this year is the year that I firmly believe that the Rain series of shoes are going to actually make it into the mainstream, because the Rain 5 is the truth. This is one of the best training shoes that I have put on in a long time. It doesn't happen very often that I put on a training shoe and I'm like, wow, this is really, really nice. And the feeling that I got when I first put on the Rain 5s was very similar to the feeling that I got when I first put on the Reebok Nano 6, which to this day for me is still probably my #1 training shoe. That shoe just did it all. It was comfortable. Everything about that shoe was excellent. And I feel pretty similar to the Rain 5s. So without further ado, let's talk about the construction of the Rain 5s. So the most notable change on this shoe compared to last year's is that it now has Under Armour's Warp upper, compared to kind of like a standard mesh upper from last year. That was not bad, but the Warp upper feels like something that has been missing in training shoes. This is like the perfect upper when it comes to training shoes. The actual material itself is kind of like a mesh that has some thicker weaves through it, and it's got some thinner weaves through it. It's kind of hard to explain. I think it actually looks pretty cool because it's different. It's unlike anything that you've ever seen on the shoe market, unless you're looking at like, the Steph Curry shoes or the Velocity Winds, which were the first ones to receive this upper. But I think it's the perfect upper when you're thinking about a training shoe. It's flexible when you need it for running, and it's also structured enough so that it holds your foot in place when you're doing some of your heavier lifts. The ankle collar on these shoes also receives an update in materials, and while it's not as technical as the Warp fabric that's found on the Vamp, it is still a welcome change over last year's model. It's kind of like a ballistic nylon or canvas type material, and while it does look kind of rough, there's a ton of cushioning in the ankle collar. And I feel like they've added more than last year, but when I asked them, they said that it was the same amount. One thing that you will notice though is that the heel is not quite as turned out as last year's model, which I will grab for you so that you can see right there. And I actually feel like this style rubs less than last year's did, even though last year's had the turned out Achilles area. They also added this cool little pull tab that is offset from the center, which I think looks cool, but I know there's gonna be people out there that really dislike that it's not symmetrical to the rest of the shoe. But it kind of goes with, the other design cues with the shoe. The tongue is well cushioned, and it's kind of got that offset cut as well. And it does fit around your ankle really nicely. I actually really like wearing this style of tongue. And then the laces are also cut towards the metatarsals and the medial side of the shoe. And I feel like that actually makes the shoe fit a little bit better. It gives a little bit more breathing room on the outside of the shoe. And I'm not sure if that's actually true, but that's just what it feels like to me. The lacing system on the shoe is kind of like fly wire type lacing. It's got these eyelets right here that shoot down into the sides of the shoe so that once you cinch the shoe up, it gives you a nice locked in fit. The laces on the shoe are rope style laces, and if there was anything that I would complain about these shoes is that they are really long. So when you like lace these all the way up, get them really nice and tight, they flop around all over the place. Another thing that I will complain about with the lacing on this shoe is this top eyelet. If you lace through the bottom of it, it's kind of hard to get a solid tie when you put these shoes on. So I would recommend that you just flip them and lace them through the top, and it just makes getting the laces tied a lot easier with the shoe. So taking a look at the insole of the shoe, it is a Perf X insole still, and to me it feels softer than the Tribase Rain 4s, but when you look at the model number and everything, it's the same exact one. I'm just holding them both in my hands, and this is the Rain 5s and this is the Rain 4s, and to me, the Rain 5s actually does look a little bit like a millimeter thicker. It feels noticeably softer to me. So I don't know if my 4s have just compressed over time, but it is a very comfortable, very, very good insole. It does not shift around or anything. It's breathable. My feet never really get hot or anything. And overall, I really like the insole that they have put into the Rain series of shoes. All right, so now taking a look at the base of these shoes, the Rain 5s still use full-length micro G foam for the midsole cushioning, and it's their tried and true midsole foam that they've always used in their Rain series of shoes. But throughout the years, what they've done is they've just kind of added a little bit more and more. The Rain 1s were pretty stiff and hard, but when we got to the Rain 3s, the shoes got a lot more flexible, and with last year's Rains, I thought the amount of midsole foam was like spot on, perfect. With the Rain 5s, I think that they've actually one-upped last year. And while they said that they didn't add anything to the midsole, it does feel a little bit more flexible, a little bit softer. It might be from, the combination of the warp upper and the softer insole, but these shoes feel noticeably more flexible than last year's shoe, and it feels like there's more or softer cushioning, which I really like. I think that it does a really nice job in making these shoes just day-to-day easier to train in, while not detracting at all from anything else. The shoes are still plenty responsive and stable for lifting movements. The drop on these shoes is still one of my favorite features of the shoe. It's still a 2mm drop, and this is in a time when we're getting up to like 7-9mm drop shoes. I love that Under Armour is really kind of keeping it true with that 2mm drop. The heel counter on the shoe is the same that you'll find in the Tribase Rain 4s. It stabilizes the heel well. It's not super bulky. What I will say is that it's not like amazing for doing handstand push-ups, because you actually have to really try to get that to touch the wall, and it's probably more work to do that than it's worth. The outsole is still the same rubber that they were using from last year. You still have the Tribase design at the bottom that supports all the arches of your foot, and then you have a raised lateral and medial sidewall, which they've cut down over the years, so it's not as kind of like gaudy as it was in the previous models, and it still does a good job in tracking the rope. While I will say that rope climbs were not like a standout thing with these shoes, I thought that doing rope climbs in these shoes was good. It just wasn't as good as some of the best out there, like the Noble Trainer Plus or the Nike Metcon 8. There are grooves on the forefoot for a little bit more flexibility, and what I also really like about these shoes is that the toe spring angle is very minimal, so it's easy to get a very grounded push in the forefoot of the shoe. And finally, I weighed these shoes in at 370 grams for a men's size 10.5 compared to the size 10 that I had last year that weighed in at 363 grams. It seems like the addition of the warp upper actually shaved off some weight with these shoes as well, considering that I am now wearing a 10.5 compared to last year's 10. Okay, so when it comes to sizing your Tribase Rain 5s, if you wore a 10 last year, you're gonna wanna get a size 10.5 this year. I feel like the sizing kind of got a little bit smaller. There's still a good amount of width in the toe box when you size them and make them properly fit, but the 4s I was able to wear a size 10 comfortably, And with the 5s, I tried the size 10, and I just liked the way that the 10.5 fit a little bit better. I had more room for my toes to splay and move around, whereas the size 10 was usable, but just kind of felt a little bit more constricted. If you were somebody in the past that could not wear Under Armour shoes because you thought that they were too narrow, and I don't blame you, they actually were, you will not have that problem with the Tribase Rain 5s. Assuming that you size these correctly, which would be half a size up from like a Reebok size and probably in line with a Nike size. I actually started sizing up my Nike Metcon 8s to a 10.5 as well, and I like the way that those fit, and they fit similar to the way that the Under Armours fit. Another problem area that some people had in the past with Under Armour shoes was that they would feel the lateral sidewalls press up against their arches, and that is noticeable when you first get your Rain 5s. It does go away after a little bit of wear and break-in, and overall I think these are gonna fit a variety of foot shapes very, very well. All right, so when it comes to running, I thought these shoes did really well, assuming you're gonna be okay with the fact that they just kind of weigh a little bit more, since they are training shoes after all. The Micro G midsole does a great job in absorbing impact. It's comfortable enough for the runs that you're gonna find in a typical training session or CrossFit workout, and that's assuming you're not gonna be running miles and miles and miles at a time. I still think that these will probably be okay if you wanted to run like a 5K or something in them, but I would personally stick to sprints and like normal like 400, 800, maybe even a mile during a typical CrossFit workout. I think that these shoes are much better for like a mid-foot, forefoot strike. Heel strikers can probably still survive with these shoes. There's a slight heel rocker, but what I did notice was that it took a little bit more effort for me to run on a curved treadmill in these shoes because the stack height just isn't all that tall in them compared to like say the Nano 13, which was the other shoe that I was using, and then another pair of running shoes that I was also using. But considering that these are a low drop, low stack height training shoe, I think running in them is actually really comfortable, assuming that you are into like a mid-foot and forefoot strike, kind of like pose running. These shoes also did well for bodyweight movements. I thought they were comfortable for double unders, box jumps. They were very responsive. The traction on doing like bar facing burpees was also really nice. I never felt any kind of issues with my foot sliding around when I was getting up or doing my pivots. The silhouette of them is pretty streamlined as well. They don't feel big on your feet, even though they are a little bit on the heavier side. And also with the Micro G midsole, I never felt like my foot got too fatigued or too tired from doing multiple bounding movements. And when it came to lifting, I thought that these shoes did really well, but that's probably their weakest spot because they're a little bit softer, they're a little bit more flexible than some of the other training shoes that I'm testing currently. But I think for the majority of the lifts that you're gonna do, they're gonna hold up just fine. I was able to snatch 96% of my 1-rep snatch in these shoes, and that's after using Vans to snatch all the way up to 215, then finally switching into these shoes to just hit that number, and I hit it the first time that I tried it, which was actually really surprising to me, especially considering that I just changed my shoes and I did not have to get used to being in the Tribase Rains at all. I did some heavy deadlifts in these shoes. The 2mm drop is ideal for something like that. And while there is still midsole foam, it does not get in the way. These shoes are never squishy. They never feel like vague or like you're pushing through sand when you're using these shoes. Same thing went for squatting. I personally like squatting in a more flat shoe. And while I know that's gonna be subjective for other people, some people are gonna want that heel to give them a more of a mechanical advantage, I felt like squatting in these shoes did just fine. So I'm currently also testing out the Nano 13, which is probably one of the better lifting shoes that I've tried out in a long time. And I feel like I have the same kind of confidence in the Tribase Rains as I do as the Nano 13s. The big difference and the main difference that I think a lot of people are gonna notice is that the Under Armours are going to be a more flat feeling shoe. They're gonna feel a little bit lower to the ground. So if that's something that you're looking for, then definitely check out the Under Armours. If you wanted something that was a little bit more elevated, had a higher heel, then you might wanna take a look at something like Rad or Tier or the Nano 13s. But I think that there's still a lot of people out there that don't necessarily want to go with a barefoot shoe, but still want a lower drop, still want a little bit of cushioning, and cushioning that also does not get in the way. And I think if that's you, the Tribase Rain 5s are gonna be perfect for you. All right, so value. The Tribase Rain 5s retail at $130. That's the going rate for training shoes for the last like 5 years. Now we're seeing an uptick in prices for training shoes. The Nano 13s are gonna be $140. The Trainer Plus is $140. Rads are $150. Strike Haze are $150. So what you're getting in the Rain 5s is a relative bargain. This is a flagship training shoe. It's one of the best training shoes that I've tried out in a long time, and it still only costs $130. The Tribase Rain 5s do everything really, really well. They're not perfect at everything, but neither was the Nano 6. The Nano 6 was another shoe that just did everything really, really well, and you couldn't hate on it because of that feature alone. I mean, if you want to call that a feature. There was nothing bad about the Nano 6, and there's nothing bad with the Tribase Rain 5s. It's easily in the top 5 of my training shoes right now, and it's something that, unlike the previous models of Rains, I want to return back to and work out in, because I feel like I'm just never gonna be at a shortage of stability, of flexibility. I'm always gonna be comfortable doing whatever workout in the Rain 5s. So this year is the year that I finally, firmly believe that the Rains are gonna make it into the mainstream of CrossFit or training shoes. But Under Armour just needs to stay on top of marketing, because they are so bad at marketing their training shoes. It hurts me because I think that they're so overlooked every year. If you're looking at the Rain 5s, help Under Armour out, tell your friends, buy these shoes, get them out there, because everybody needs to try these shoes out. They are so good, and I highly recommend them. We're starting off 2023 on a really high note with these shoes. So if you guys have any questions about the Rain 5s, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure that you guys are subscribed to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching, guys.